So, what if the first shot of the American Civil War wasn't a cannonball at all, but a legal document? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty provocative argument that asks us to look way beyond the battlefield and deep into the fine print of history.
I mean, we all know the textbook answer, right? It was the Confederate forces firing on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, April 12, 1861. That's the shot that kicked the whole thing off. Simple.
But the perspective we're digging into today says that this famous story, the one we all know, kind of papers over a really complex legal fight that was already boiling over long before any cannons were fired. And honestly, it's an argument that could change how you see the start of the war.
Okay, let's get into it. The best place to start is with the legal foundation of this whole argument, the land itself. Who actually, legally, owned Fort Sumter?
From this point of view, everything hinges on one single word: ceded. See, the land wasn't sold, it wasn't conquered, it was ceded. And that little distinction? Well, it turns out it carries a ton of legal weight.
So this slide really breaks down the core of the argument. You got to think of it less like buying a house and more like a lease with some major strings attached. The feds could build a fort. Sure, they could put soldiers in it, but only as long as they followed the rules laid out by South Carolina. You break the rules, the deal might just be off.
And the source we're looking at really hammers this point home. The way they see it, the federal government was basically a tenant. They weren't the absolute owner, and they were legally stuck with the original terms of the deal they made with South Carolina.
So you see, according to this line of thinking, it's not just about who owns the property. It's about sovereignty. Who has the ultimate political power over that property? Who's really the one in charge here?
And check this out. This quote from a Supreme Court justice way back in 1838 makes that distinction crystal clear. Just because the U.S. government owns a piece of land inside a state's borders, that doesn't automatically mean they get political control. From this point of view, the actual legal authority, the jurisdiction, stayed with South Carolina.
Now, if you follow that legal logic, the argument goes that the moment South Carolina seceded, it completely shattered the conditions of that original land deal. And if the conditions are broken, well, the rights to that property snap right back to the state.
And to really back this up, the source brings in one of the big guns, James Madison. The idea here is that even the threat of the federal government using force against a state could be seen as an act that just cancels all previous agreements, including any legal claims to Fort Sumter.
All right, now let's see how this legal maze leads to what this perspective calls the point of no return, a broken agreement that was in place before a single cannonball ever flew through the air.
This interpretation says that before the famous attack, there was a formal armistice, a truce, in effect. And as it says right here, breaking a truce isn't just a small thing. It is universally seen as a treacherous act of war.
The terms were apparently crystal clear and even filed away in the U.S. War and Navy departments. The U.S. government promised not to send more troops to its forts in the South, and in exchange, the Confederate authorities promised not to attack them. The whole point was to keep a lid on things while they tried to negotiate peace.
Okay, this timeline is where it all comes to a head. First, you get the truce. Then, Lincoln makes his famous public speech. But then, and this is the absolute key to the whole argument, it's claimed that on March 12th, a full month before the attack, Lincoln secretly ordered ships to reinforce the fort. If true, that would be a direct violation of the armistice.
So when you put it all together, the legal arguments about who owned the land, plus this bombshell claim about a broken truce, the source offers a conclusion that completely flips the script on who really started the war.
So, from this perspective, those U.S. supply ships weren't on some peaceful relief mission. No, this was an act of war. It was a violation of a truce, and it was an invasion of what they considered, through their own legal reasoning, the sovereign territory of South Carolina.
And this wasn't just some fringe idea cooked up decades later. The argument points to real accounts from the time, like this one from a Rhode Island newspaper published the day after the attack. It suggests that even back then, some people believed Lincoln had cleverly maneuvered the South into firing that first shot.
So, in the end, this whole perspective kind of forces us to ask a different question. If the first shot is the act that truly breaks the peace, well, where does the story of Fort Sumter really begin? Is it with a cannonball, a secret order, or a legal document signed many, many years before?